So this is our second year. We did a claim study where we reached out to a lot of the markets who are here, some who aren't here, who have some flavor of cyber risk coverage. We were fortunate enough to collect about 150 claims in the cyber area. We've come together over the past few months and we got some good information, and I was surprised by some of the trends that we saw this year. Personal information, no surprise, coming out most frequently exposed during breaches, followed up by protected health information. Causes of loss, hackers, most frequent cause of loss, followed up by lost laptops. We've heard that a number of times. I feel like 1 in 3 events, what I'm seeing personally working with the insurers, seems to be a lost laptop, and 50% of the time it's not even the insured. It's one of their vendors, business partners, upstream or downstream, that caused them the problem. Sectors most at risk, it flipped this year. Last year it was health sector. This year, financial services. Some of the average cost of loss that we saw in the study, $3.7 million per claim. It went up from $2.4 million last year. The claims ranged from $2,000 all the way up to $76 million for some of the claims. The average, the most typical, the mode, came in the area of $200,000 per incident. The average cost per record, again, last year it was around $5, $5.99. It's almost scary to report it because you hear earlier people talk about the Larry Poneman Institute and what his per record costs come out, and we're worlds apart. Ours come in at $3.94 per record. Again, this is a little bit skewed. It's not, we're looking at 100-some claims. The larger losses can skew it in certain ways, and Poneman, in all honesty, is studying a little bit different things. He's looking at lost opportunity, things that we weren't actually capturing in the claim study. The crisis service cost, which was talked a lot about during the panel, came in at almost $1 million per event, and that's for forensics, legal counsel, notification, credit monitoring, things like that. Per record, or the number of records actually went down this year, but the actual breach, the pre-breach costs seemed to go through the roof this year. Crisis service, similar. The legal defense, very similar between 2 years, and then the legal settlements was actually higher for the indemnity. Some of the business sectors most at risk, at least in this study, financial services, healthcare, retail. The percentages of cost per business sector, I was paying attention here to more the red lines, the legal damages, which sector was getting sued, financial services, hospitality, professional services, things like that. And this is an average cost per breach across the different buckets of risk. We send out a flyer to the insurers. We basically ask them to, we want to try to capture these 10 buckets that you're paying claims on. They report these in. So we were looking at the computer forensics. When you have a data breach event, what on average was being paid out on your claim for computer forensics? That came in at about $350,000. If you had to notify the victims in a breach, that was coming in on average about $180,000 per event. There was a call center cost, but that wasn't always used. The call center wasn't always deployed. There was some credit monitoring in a healthy number of the claims. Again, about $350,000 on average. And then the legal counsel under the green segment here was actually for what we call a breach coach. Just the initial guidance in the critical 24 hours, 72 hours to guide the client through, here's the initial steps you need to be worrying about. Do you actually have to notify? And then there was, of course, the defense cost to actually defend the claim if you were sued and it turned into litigation. It was coming in at about $600,000. The settlements on average, about $2.1 million. There was some PCI fines picked up in a couple claims, surprisingly, and then finally some regulatory fines. A little bit on first party. We asked for first party claims. We did not receive that many in. I think we received 5 first party claims. The business sectors that were reported these claims was telecommunications, professional services, and manufacturing. They sustained and it usually was some kind of denial of service that caused a business interruption. There was also some theft of intellectual property, which some of the folks earlier were mentioning as a risk point. We do not have a number on this. These claims over the past year tend to be, we're still calculating what it ultimately is going to cost our client. That's what the claims reps are telling us. And with that, I want to turn over this slide to Mr. Parisi.
I think the business interruption claims are still traveling the way privacy claims were before the state breach law obligated that there be notification. Because what we've seen, and what you're seeing up on the slide, is a study by the the Business Continuity Institute. What we found was that disruptions to supply chain or logistic interruptions to a company, that there were more disruptions caused by failures of technology, which included cyber attacks, but just system outages, your vendor, your cloud service provider not providing the service as contracted for. Then there were disruptions due to adverse weather conditions, which is pretty much what everyone really thinks about when they think about business interruption. They think about floods, they think about earthquakes. So I think what we're seeing is a little bit of kind of the iceberg principle, that there are probably a lot more business interruptions that would be covered, that would trigger the business interruption than are actually being either populated up because the reporting mechanism isn't there, or also, frankly, because the business interruption coverage has been probably the red-headed stepchild of cyber insurance. It hasn't been aggressively purchased or sold the way privacy has. There's a finite group of people who have privacy issues. They're the companies that handle and collect private information. They're the companies that are largely North American based, with few exceptions. But there's not any company that other than the farmer that was mentioned on the last panel, that doesn't have technology as a critical portion of their infrastructure. I mean, there's not a company out there that's not reliant or dependent upon technology. So if you want to think about what the next upside is or the lift to the cyber market, it's probably in the business interruption and the extra expense.
We assess several hundred companies a year, all sizes, all sectors, and it's usually we're coming in on behalf of the insurer or broker and we're looking at the liability issues, but very often we get into, tell us about some past incidents that you had, and it may not be a data breach event that was most on their mind. It was sometimes the business interruption. They are sustaining a fair amount of denial of service attacks out there, and depending on the business model, it's how critical it is to that company. One of the reasons why I wasn't getting the claim data is it's just not part of the coverage that often. I think, as Bob said, first party is just not being sold so much, but I think the losses are out there, and the companies have no duty often to report a denial of service attack because personal information isn't being touched. So.